Well, hello everyone. Today I decided to do a bit of an update on our entire collection of orchids, because we officially just hit the midway point of the year, and I would like to have some sort of record on how everything was doing at this point. And I thought you might like to see how some of our orchids are doing, how they've been evolving, some surprise blooms we've got. So I thought a little overview of the entire orchid collection would be an interesting video to make. I'm going to start up here with our big complex Phalaenopsis. And as you can see, they're all doing good, but most of their blooms are on their way out, except for this one that bloomed later. And I wasn't even expecting this plant to flower because she was completely rootless a few months ago. And I thought she was still recovering, but turns out she recovered so well she even gave us a small flower spike. We still have the cymbidium over there. I still don't know whether I'm going to put it outside or not. I don't think it has enough light up there, just with that grow light. But at the same time, as soon as summer hits, I think it's going to get completely scorched in our balcony. So we're still debating on whether we're going to place it outside or not. Up here, we also have our Bletilla that we got a few months ago to see if we can grow them. And it's not doing great. Some of the new growths rotted off, but at the same time, before I started watering as much as I do now, some of the growths seem to be drying off. We still haven't quite got the hang of growing this one yet. I placed some sphagnum moss here because she was growing roots out of the pot, and at least according to the internet, that's a big no-no. Down here we have our Paphiopedilum shelf. We ended up putting our paphs here because this part of this furniture has more room for the taller ones. And we used some IKEA shelving there for the smaller Paphiopedilums. We also had to turn off one of the lights because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see any plant. We also keep some of our carnivorous here, including the last ones we just unboxed that for now seem to be doing great. Back there we also have our one and only Phragmipedium that we got a few months ago in the post-orchid show. And so far it seems to be doing good. I'm always afraid it needs more water because all guides say it needs to be wet all the time. But it kind of dries out a little bit, I'm not going to lie. And I think it's still doing good. It has 2 or 3 new growths over there. So far so good. We also recently repotted our Paphiopedlium and one of our Mannii ones. And overall our Paphiopedlium seem to be doing good. This one hasn't bloomed this year, so I don't know what's going on here. But our paphs sometimes go 1 or 2 years without blooming, and it doesn't seem to be a reflection of their overall health. Back here we have our Paphiopedilum Pinocchio, and that one always seems to be struggling a little bit. We've had it for years, and it gives out smaller fins, it makes a spike and then aborts it. I'm not sure what is it about this particular Paphiopedilum that just doesn't do great for us, but so far we just keep it here and hope he figures himself out, because I can't figure out what's wrong with him. Next to it we have our one and only Chysis, which seem to turn into a spider mite magnet every year. But they don't seem to spread to our other plants other than maybe the Catasetums, so we just use a little bit of insecticide and move on. Over here we have Maxillarias and a couple of Catasetums. And of course, the elephant in the room is the fact that we finally got a flower spike out of this Catasetum. It's the one that we got on group purchase from Shorter that was supposed to be like an experiment. We all got the same hybrid, primary hybrid of Catasetum, and we were supposed to all grow it and compare the flowers. And this was years ago, and I think only one other person still is reporting on how theirs is doing. They were able to flower it 1 or 2 years ago, and ours just took its sweet time, and I'm pretty sure it's been because we just increased the artificial light over it that it finally was able to bloom. So we're really excited to see the flowers on it. Back there we have our Millennium Magic that was a little bit behind this year, but has grown a whole new fin. It doesn't look the healthiest, but hopefully we can whip it back into shape. Down here we have our Maxillaria variabilis, which is an absolute beast that I should have reported this year. Our Maxillaria picta, which also should have been reported. Our Maxillaria schunkiana that doesn't seem to want to bloom for us this year. The tendifolia, which did bloom for us after years and years. One single flower, but still, better than nothing. And it smelled so good, I honestly could not care less. And down here we have our Aerides that also didn't seem to want to bloom this year, even though it bloomed for the first time last year. After the Aerides, on this other shelf, we have the rest of our African orchids and some of our Vandaceous orchids. Down here we have the 2 African orchids that Matt sent us, which are doing really good. We have some new root development on the agranchum. Over here we have our 2 Aerides. This one is blooming for us for the first time this year. And just to make things more frustrating, this one that bloomed twice last year doesn't seem to want to make a flower spike. In the back we have 2 Vanda types that are growing pretty well. That one gave us 5 flower spikes this year, so I'm not complaining. Our Enanthera blooms for us every year, but the Christensonia did not make a flower spike this year. Also blooming for us regularly is our Neophonetia that's also getting quite beastly. And over here we have a really small Vanda type that also bloomed, even though it made the tiniest blooms ever. An Ascocentrum seedling that unfortunately fell on the ground recently, so it doesn't look its best. And this is the Dimorphorcus that Matt so kindly sent to us. Still doing good. Let's hope we can keep it up. The next 2 rows of shelves are just our Phalaenopsis collection, so let's hope I can get through those without taking 3 days. Over here we have our Cornu-cervi in bloom again. It only gives us 1 flower at a time, and the plant doesn't seem to be the healthiest it could be. But let's see if maybe with some more time and after a repot, it will flower and grow better for us. This is a Cornu-cervi hybrid that is going to bloom for the first time this year. Here we have the 2 speciosas that turned out to be the exact same variety because Schwarter sent the wrong plant again. Back there we have a lueddemanniana that's about to bloom. Our 2 beautiful Corningiana hybrids that are still in bloom and looking amazing and smelling even better. I swear, if you want good smelling hybrids, these 2 may be some of my favorite scents when it comes to Phalaenopsis. Back there is our Aerides snow that we just repotted and that was in bloom for a really long time. This is our hyeroglyphica that we had to pull away from the wall because it wasn't content with the 3 huge flower spikes it already had grown last year. It decided to make 2 more that grew directly at the wall, so we had to pull it forward a little bit. It's a plant that it's in deep need of a repot, but of course I procrastinated and now it's in flower, so it's going to have to wait a little bit more. Next shelf over, we have our Bellina, our violacea, and some of its hybrids. The Bellina right there and the violacea here are again the exact same story. They needed a repot, I waited, now they're flowering, so I don't have the guts to do it. Here we have one of their hybrids flowering. Back there we have some more of their hybrids. This is our Phalaenopsis mariae that caught some sort of terrible bacterial infection or viral and we had to chop off most of the plant, and only like the youngest little leaves survived. And it's here chugging along, but I'm not sure if this plant is ever going to make back to health, because it has been a couple of years. So I don't have the heart to throw it away, but at the same time, I'm not too hopeful. And it is the second Mannii that we have, and that has done this, so maybe there is something about the orchid itself that doesn't agree with us. These are two Bellina hybrids that we bought years ago at a show from an Asian nursery. And they were blooming size because they came with spikes, but they came in the tiniest of pots. And we have since pot them, but they flower, but they give tiny flowers. They don't seem to be doing their healthiest. So I think after this bloom, what we're going to do is try and pot them a bit, see if they start developing more, and start looking like more healthy plants. On the next shelf over, we have the Fairy Tale Joy and the Vile Coral, doing good and flowering for us every year. And over here we have a few more Bellina hybrids and Amboinensis hybrids. Our Phalaenopsis Amboinensis, as you can see, is still beautifully in bloom. Doesn't smell great, but it does put on a good show. This is our Malibu Imp, which has flowered for way over a year and now finally seems to have taken a break. It is trying to grow a new leaf, and I really should check if she needs a repot, because it's not often that I have an opportunity to repot her. Well, it says 2020, so I would have to check the media to see if it needs to be repotted this year or if I can try and stretch it another year. Back there we have our Bashy Canary that's finally on one of its last blooms. This is our Phalaenopsis Joshua Irwin Ginsberg, which had crown rot, which is not something I've dealt with very often, but I just let it be in hopes that it would make a keiki. And as you can see, it has. So I guess I'll have to wait a little bit more for the flowers, but at least I didn't lose the plant. This primary hybrid here took years of being very sickly, as you can see by the leaves. And this year it finally flowered for us for the first time. In this shelf we also have our venosa, that again desperately needs a repot, but as I was getting around to it, it made 2 flower spikes. So I think she might just have to wait for another year. Back there we have our Phalaenopsis gigantea that is surprisingly doing really well. Even though they are a bit finicky, this one is chugging along great. And our gigantea hybrid, as you can see by the size of the leaves, that also blooms for us every year and does great. Down here on the bottom shelves we have our Mannii, crossed with lindenii, our finleyi hybrids, another lindenii hybrid, and our schilleriana, which are all doing pretty well, and we're starting to be able to repot some of them after they flowered, like these two. And some of them bloomed for the first time this year, which I'm really stoked about. This is the next shelf over, where we have another schilleriana hybrid, which is our Jiaho Pink Girl that was just unflowering. Back there we have one of our most recent acquisitions, which is another finleyi hybrid, which we love, that is about to bloom too. This little miniature, which I think needs some sort of terrarium setting or to be mounted, because it doesn't seem to be doing its best in a pot like this. This Phalaenopsis lowiei hybrid that we've had for almost as long as we've had orchids, it was part of our first shorter order and has never done great. I think it was Bumblebee who had the same plant and also had a bit of trouble with hers. So I don't know if it is the Phalaenopsis lowiei that is supposed to be a little bit of trouble. Back here it's supposed to be our Phalaenopsis Equestris that was a year or two from blooming when we got it last year. I got it for my birthday, but as you can see, It thinks otherwise. It thinks clearly that it's blooming size, because that is most definitely a flower spike. Over here, Phalaenopsis Flourish Rose is on its last leg of flowering, but it has been flowering for a really long time, and this is an adorable little hybrid. So we're really happy we got it years ago. And back there we have another schilleriana hybrid that is blooming for us for the first time. We got it from Joseph Hu, the nursery, and it hasn't done great, as you can tell by the leaf size. It didn't do great at adapting out of those 100% pure sphagnum setups that Asian nurseries use. But even with the smaller leaves, it seems to have bounced back again to give us 2 little flowers. Over here we have our summer rose hybrid that, even though it didn't make a new flower spike this year, it branched out last year's spike and is now giving us a whole new flush of flowers. And we also have our sedirea japonica that, even though we placed outside to give it a bit of a winter rest, doesn't seem to have resulted in a flower spike this year, unfortunately. Here we have most of our mini Phalaenopsis. Almost all of them are out of bloom, except for this one that hasn't had a repot in 5 years, because every time she's almost done blooming, as you can see, she decides to make another flower spike. So I think this is the year that I'm gonna say enough and repot her, and if that flower spike doesn't keep growing, too bad. I've had her in bloom for most of the year, either way. And our Sogo Vivian, that always blooms a little bit behind all the other mini Phalaenopsis that is still in bloom. We also have another big chunk of our carnivorous here. And as you can see, since the repot, they just took off. And some of them are getting so tight in their pots that I'm starting to think I might have to do another repot. Over here we have our big Vanda, hard at work in what I think are 4 keikis. A lot of new roots, and I thought it was 3 flower spikes, but at least one of them is branching out in a weird way that doesn't look like the flower spikes she has made in the past, but it also doesn't look like a keiki, so I don't really know what this plant is doing.